while I was in law school, I worked for FRAC, Food Research and Action Center, as an intern there. And at the time, um, there were a legal services corporation funded support centers, national support centers. They existed to provide assistance. They did some other things also, but they existed to provide national technical assistance to all of the legal services programs around the country. And FRAC was the state support or the national support center, backup center for all the nutrition programs. So for at the time, the food stamp program, school meals, other nutrition assistance that was out there. But I worked on the food stamp program with some fantastic attorneys there, and got to work with and talk with and help lawyers all over the country who were doing work and advocacy around the program and for clients with particular issues. And it really did solidify also for me, not just this is what I want to do, I want to go to legal services, but that ultimately I saw the value of both that direct one-on-one client representation and then also the value of the larger advocacy. So that sort of set my path right away that this is where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. First stop was Delaware, and I went to Delaware for a year, then came back to New Jersey, and went to work at Essex-Newark Legal Services. When I had been in Delaware and doing the work there is when I first learned about legal services in New Jersey, both LS&J and D, and also some of the local programs, because New Jersey was doing really important work around emergency assistance. Emergency assistance is a short-term, time-limited program that was offered to some families for like 3 months. Obviously, that's not enough. When someone's in crisis, they need more help than that. And New Jersey took that on. New Jersey challenged the time limits in the emergency assistance program. It was a great example of the strength and power of a coordinated legal services system, even before we had a real coordinated legal services system. At that point, there were programs in practically every county, many more than we have now, but everyone really worked together because of the entitlements and housing task force work to bring that case or bring a series of cases to challenge the emergency assistance program time limits. And we got a series of really successful decisions out of the Supreme Court and Appellate Division also for one of them. But these are really successful decisions to say, no, these are not time limited in the way that the agency wants to make them time limited. If the legislature wanted these time limited, they would have done so. Plus, there's an obligation on the state to have this coordinated emergency services system. You need to do something here to provide this safety net. That's as close as we got at that point, I would say, to really having that's as close as the court got to saying there's a right to shelter or assistance. Didn't go quite that far, but at least it did quite a bit at that point. And it really was a coordinated effort. There were attorneys involved from Passaic County, from Essex County, from South Jersey, from LS&J, and others. So it really, there were these series of cases that brought in stories from all over the state. And the message was clear that they needed to do something broader. This wasn't an isolated problem. This wasn't, homelessness was something that existed all across New Jersey. And the court needed to take that seriously and recognize that in New Jersey they were going to do more. So I had all of that as background, that I knew that that was going on in New Jersey and wanted to come and work with other advocates who were doing this kind of work and doing this kind of coordinated work. So that also played a big part in why I ended up here, I guess I'd say. At the time, I had been out a year. I had some other sort of more grounded experience in legal services, but I was still a brand new attorney. I mean, year out, I knew nothing. And I called a friend of mine who I knew and respected, who knew about legal services and about the different programs, and asked him for some advice at that point. I said, I've got a couple of things out there. I've talked to a few programs, and what do you think about Essex-Newark Legal Services? So he said, I don't know. There's been a lot of upheaval there. They've had a lot of turnover over the last several years. There's a lot going on. And I said, well, they have a new director, and it's Felipe Shimana. And he said, oh, well, then forget everything I just said. Yeah, no, Felipe's great. That's the game changer. And go ahead, go do that. Which is good. That's what I wanted to hear, because it was a very high volume practice, but it was absolutely in the community. It was a great office, a staff that was committed to the work, from the folks at the front desk receiving clients, all the way through to the director. And worked there doing housing work. Now, I did not ever intend to be a housing attorney. I went to school, and my plan was to do public entitlements work. I started doing public entitlements in Delaware. I was the statewide attorney for Delaware, Community Legal Aid in Delaware. And I got to Newark, and I was in the housing unit, and I was doing landlord-tenant work. And I called a different friend and said, what am I doing? I have to go to court. I never thought I would be going to court. I have to litigate cases, these housing cases. I don't know how to, I have to go to trial. How do I introduce evidence? Wait, what am I doing? Entitlements was very informal in Delaware in particular. We didn't have an Office of Administrative Law. We had a very informal process. But here I was. I had to figure it out quickly. I had great people around me that helped, and learned quickly how to be a trial attorney and get into court in a very high volume practice where every case mattered. You were the one in between someone being homeless. Absolutely loved it, loved the work, loved the clients, loved everything about the place. There were challenges, but overall, really, it was a great place to be a new attorney at the time. The message always was, we're here to provide high quality representation for people. Just because someone doesn't give us a retainer, with money, just because they can't afford a high priced attorney, doesn't mean that they aren't entitled to and shouldn't be getting the best representation, and that we in legal services are going to be providing that best representation. We're going to do a better job than any private attorney that they would have hired. And really learned how to be a lawyer and think big about cases, and recognize that from the small case and the simple advice to the case you're taking to the Supreme Court, it all makes a difference.